Looking at the decisions that the Israelis have made lately about attacking a Hezbollah leader in Beirut and assassinating, one presumes, a Hamas leader in Tehran, that this Israeli regime may actually be looking for that wider war that the American diplomats have been working continuously from the very beginning to try to head off. Assassinating a Hamas person in Tehran is such a direct slap in the face of Tehran that the Iranians regard themselves as a major power. They're not going to take a slap in the face like that. They can't do that, just like the Israelis couldn't do nothing in response to October 7th. I mean, there are things they're compelled. And the Iranians felt compelled a few months ago to do some kind of a response to the killing of a couple of their people on Syrian territory or Lebanese territory. But in the very capital of Iran, taking out a guest who was the main negotiator for Hamas, and these fruitless negotiations have been going on forever, right in Iran. That's really provocative. I have a friend who says, well, from the Israeli point of view, anytime they can take out a Hamas leader, they're going to do it, regardless of the consequences. It's just they're on the hit list. Well, that might be true, but it sure is a hell of a way to think. I mean, the wider war you don't want, if you don't want it, is a huge deal. You don't just automatically take actions without regard to consequences. What kind of folly is that to be a decision maker for a nation that's dealing with war and peace? But it turns out that even at least so I read on Reuters, that even the strike on against Hezbollah, against a Hezbollah leader in Beirut, I read that was in violation of some more or less tacit or explicit agreement about the rules. That basically, according to this article, Hezbollah had reason to believe that the Israelis had agreed that the Beirut would be a safe zone. I don't know if that's true, but if it is true, once again, it represents the Israelis crossing a line. Now, why would you be crossing lines like this if you didn't want to make a bigger war happen? I try to understand. That terrible thing happened on that Druze village up in the Golan Heights, and whatever it is, 10 kids were murdered by a missile exploding on a soccer field. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. But I think we have reason to believe that the fact that they hit a soccer field and all those kids got killed didn't represent any kind of escalation on the Hezbollah side. I think that the picture that emerges is they were doing more of what had been sort of the going thing for months. And this missile got, off track and did what it did instead of hitting a military target that it was supposed to hit. Well, I don't really know if it was or wasn't an escalation, but the Israelis are dealing with it as though it was an escalation. And my suspicion is, from what I've read, that Hezbollah wasn't trying to do anything else. It just happened. So how much need do you, if they didn't escalate deliberately, but just did something, how much need do you have to go beyond symbolic? If that. Just continue where you left off with this low boil of a war you've been waging for 7 months or whatever it is. Well, ever since, immediately after the October 7th Hamas atrocities, this Hezbollah Israel thing began. And Israel's got 60,000 citizens that have been displaced for months because northern Israel is not safe. So there are issues here. But how much do you need to cross lines when fight or war isn't necessary? So I'm inferring that the Israelis, and this I don't know if I how much what the odds are that I'm right about this, but I think there's a good chance that the Israelis are feeling like we are so besieged by Iran and its proxies, and time isn't necessarily on our side. So, like in Hamlet, if it is not now, then it is to be, all that line. Basically, now is as good a time as any and maybe better. That's what I think they're thinking. But also, in terms of the judgment involved, I have serious doubts about whether that would be the group that would make that decision would be one to whom Israel's long-term interests should be entrusted. I think it could well be bad for Israel because I see these guys like Ben Gvir and who are so nakedly fascistic and ugly that of course they'd go for maximal conflict. That's what fascists do. So I'm not sure that they're able to think through strategically. I don't think that they've thought through well strategically how to respond to October 7th. But anyway, whether it's bad for Israel or not, and I think it would be, though I gotta confess, you're coming up with this rising nuclear power. You got Hezbollah with 150,000, some missiles, many of them precision guided and within range of almost any Israeli target you can name. Yeah, they are besieged. But I expect that there's a bigger route to be able. The region has already shown its willingness to accept Israel as part of the region. That's what the Abraham Accords did. It's just up to Israel to act in a way that doesn't require its alliances in the region with Arab states to act in a way that doesn't erode them and compel their possible allies to disown them. But that's not how this group thinks. But really, my concern here has got to do with what that would mean for the American election. And as much as I care about whether Israel destroys itself or not, my greater involvement has got to do with whether the United States, my nation, land of the free, where the rule of law and liberty and justice for all, whether that's going to survive here in America, which is what this election's about. I'm increasingly optimistic that things are going well for Trump to be defeated. And the futures markets are moving. I don't know where they're going to settle because I've paid attention to those things for years, and sometimes movements take a long time. But Kamala is rising in the probabilities, rightly so. But if there's an all-out war in the Middle East, That's going to first of all, it's going to make the world look a whole lot more disturbing to everybody. I mean, who knows what's going to be happening, bombings of Tel Aviv or Tehran or um, who knows? It's not good for the sitting administration for the world to look out of control. And particularly in an area where this administration has been working so hard, so consistently since October 7th to help things unfold in a way that doesn't destroy too much. It's a failure. And we know that Netanyahu would love to help Trump. I think we know that. If starting a war helps fascism come to power in the United States, that's a plus for this Israeli regime. Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich, and that whole fringe that no decent Israeli government ever before would have considered including in their majority. But Netanyahu, being the sociopath he is, was willing to make any deal with any devil to hold on to power and keep himself out of jail. Oh, what a tragedy. I have a video called The Tragedy of Israel because I really love Israel in many ways. And it's a tragedy that at this moment, especially when things have been put into a kind of a crisis in terms of the relationships between the Israelis and the Palestinians, with its many dimensions, West Bank and Gaza and all that, and two-state solution, all that. Where there's such a crisis about that, and Israel's been not performing all that admirably about that issue for some time. And so the defects of Israel have put it in a position to make really bad choices right here. And so there is an administration here in the United States that will be hurt. And Kamala Harris would be inevitably tied to what have been a failed administration effort to keep the conflict contained. I'm not sure exactly how well that could be combated. I think it's a genuine vulnerability. So while I've been today talking about, I think there's a potential here for a Kamala blowout, looking simply at the state of things in the American body politic. When I look at what might be the impact of what seems possibly to be unfolding in the Middle East, which is an Israeli government maybe looking for the wider war, that could change the balance, maybe in disastrous ways. It isn't usually foreign policy that decides elections, but this wouldn't be trivial. All right, I'm asking the question, will Israel choose to have a wider war? Well, we'll know probably pretty soon. First, we got to find out what will the Iranians who advertise they're going to, how they're going to retaliate, but haven't decided yet how. Having a big meeting with all their allies like Hezbollah and the Houthis in the Yemen and all that, to have a meeting about how to retaliate. Well, with all that hoopla, it's not going to be a tweak to the nose, I don't think. And then the Israelis are going to be in the position of deciding how they're going to retaliate for the retaliation. We went through that before when that time when the two major Iranian National Guard figures were killed by the Israelis in some base, or maybe it was attached to the Iranian consulate in Damascus. I don't know. There's some international dimension to it. I wondered if the Israelis were looking for a wider war then, and I wrote about that. And the Iranians responded in a way which is sort of ambiguous with it. They kind of advertised, and the Israelis were able to protect itself almost completely against whatever it was, 100 missiles, 1,000 missiles. Anyway, there was a symbolic quality to what the Iranians did. And then the Israelis responded in some symbolic way of showing that they could blow up something in Iran that was adjacent to where they have their nuclear program or something like that. And then it all went away. So what's going to happen this time? I mean, if the Iranians wanted to just do a tweak on the nose, would they have invited everybody in for a conference to discuss it? Oh, we're going to choose the wimpy way? No, I'm worried. I'm not sure what the the Biden administration can do at this point. I think that they could increase the volume in which they say that it is essential that the Israelis not do anything that increases the likelihood of a wider war. Lay it on the line. I don't know along with what kind of a threat. To say that any policy that makes a wider war more likely, we cannot support, and cannot support is a message. I don't think it would play badly politically. I mean, there's always a question when it comes to U.S. policy toward Israel. How much can anybody afford to lose the Jewish vote if they don't take a sufficiently pro-Israel position? I think that, say, no wider war is a pro-Israel position and can be presented as such. I think that Kamala Harris is in a position to articulate U.S. policy at this point. Maybe it's not out of bounds for her to say. Maybe have Biden say it first and then have Kamala Harris back it up. It is required of Israel, for Israel's sake, not to take any steps that increase the likelihood of a wider war, which would be a disaster for a lot of people, including the Israelis. I don't think you lose the Jewish vote with that. Even the people who maybe think the Israelis have done the right hawkish thing, with its policy in Gaza of killing so many civilians in order to get to so and so many Hamas people beneath the human shield. I don't think that even those people would, for the most part, be eager to see tens of thousands of precision missiles landing on Israeli sites in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Haifa. That's not the world Israel wants to live in. So I think that the best preventive is to fire a shot across the bow. Cannot support. And dealing with something which has not yet happened, which means there are choices to be made, and Israel must make those choices on the side of not precipitating the wider war. That might deter them. And if it doesn't deter them, then the administration's in a position to protect itself by taking steps that Americans can say, were the right ones, not supporting what hurts Israel. Okay, those are my thoughts. Bye-bye. Um, I'm seeing the Israeli crisis as being one of a number of crises that are uh, define the main drama of the world right now. Uh, which is two different forms of how we deal with power and civilization. In Israel, a formerly pretty humane political system has evolved to the point where a much less humane, much more broken part of the society is calling the shots. In the United States, we're engaged in an election where the same basic issues are at stake. Yeah. The pro-democracy side in Israel said, to hell with this judicial overhaul. In America, it says, reject Trump. Same battle. In a different form with what Putin has created as an ugly thing in the middle of, or maybe it's Eastern Europe, when they invaded Ukraine. It's a battle between something which is sort of the moral equivalent of the Israeli government, I mean, in some fundamental ways, but more so with Trumpism, and to some extent with his buddy Xi in China, kind of a fascist force, arrogating to itself the right to trample on all the rights of others, like fascists do, by invading Ukraine on the basis of lies and misjudgments. The same spirit that invaded Poland from Germany in 1940. But here we are in our times. And there's a force of brokenness that's up against a force of wholeness, which is embodied in democracies. Taiwan versus China. If China were dealing not like a fascist regime with Hong Kong, if they really respected Hong Kong's right to have their own system like they promised that they would, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal about whether the people on Taiwan would insist on being separate from China. But they can see what fascism does. They can see it in Hong Kong. Liberty there has been stomped out. So across the Straits of Taiwan, we have this same confrontation of an authoritarian, aggressive political force, call it the Chinese Communist Party, call it the Xi tyranny, I don't know, whatever it is at this point, threatening democratic Taiwan that's been able to get itself together rather admirably as an independent society. No longer the dictatorship of Chiang Kai-shek, but a real democracy with a productive economy and the right, like Ukraine had the right, like American women have certain rights. Fascist tyranny versus the liberty you can purchase with a system based on the rule of law, where instead of power controlling the law and using it against society, society creates the law and controls the power of the state. It's a battle that's also a version of something that's been going on since human beings first took the unprecedented step of leaving the natural order. I got an idea developed back there, University of California Press, about how stepping across the threshold into extricating yourself from the niche in which you had evolved biologically by inventing your own way of life creates a whole new unprecedented situation, a new system, not ordered like nature. But we unleash a force that grows out of that disorder. That's what we can see. And here on this planet at this time, we are still engaged in that really ancient battle where defeating Putin's and making his power system crumble because he misjudged and committed such crimes in Ukraine. Getting rid of this fascistic group that's the Netanyahu and the extremists that hold him hostage. Getting Israel's better selves back in power, like it did as a more or less menschlich nation for decades. Whether the United States will have a moment of conversion coming up as a new surge of energy for pro-democracy and against fascism. These are the battles that define this moment in our history. Democracy has been losing ground for 20 years, say the people who keep track of these things. This is a moment where we really need the forces of democracy to become as powerful as possible and push back the destructive things that threaten human civilization in a whole variety of ways, including whether we'll destroy ourselves. Thank you for listening. Follow, subscribe, if you like, send this link around. If you're interested in seeing some of these ideas integrated into a comprehensive picture, please go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org. And may the